Welcome back to Audible Archives. I'm Rob, your host, and tonight, the fire burns low and the shadows grow long. What begins as a harmless fancy dress gathering becomes descent into ancient terror, where moonlight, jealousy, and superstition entwine. This is the Idol House of Astarte, written by Agatha Christie, reimagined for the ear and brought to life by Raul for Audible Archives. So settle in and listen carefully, for in this story, even faith may tremble before the dark. The fire crackled softly, shadows dancing across the sitting room as if they, too, leaned in to listen. Sir Henry's voice broke the quiet first. "Well then, Dr. Pender, what story you share with us?" The old clergyman gave a mild, almost apologetic smile. The kind of smile that belonged to a man who'd spent his life among hymn books and peaceful churchyards. "My life has passed mostly in quiet places," he said. "Hardly the sort of landscape where one expects adventure. And yet, when I was a young man, I encountered something so strange, so tragic, that it left a mark on me that time has never quite erased." Joyce leaned forward eagerly. "Now you got us hooked, Doctor. To go on." "I have never forgotten it," Dr. Pender continued. "Even now, with a little effort, I could recall the exact sensation, the awe, the terror of witnessing a man struck down by no mortal force I could name." A shiver ran through the group. "You're giving me the shivers, Pender," grumbled Sir Henry, rubbing his arms. "It gave me the shivers too," the clergyman replied gently. "Since that day, I have never scoffed at anyone who speaks of atmosphere. It exists. Some places carry goodness like warmth on the walls, and others are steeped in something darker. That house, the Larches, has always been unlucky," Miss Marple said, folding her knitting with deliberate calm. "Mr. Smithers lost all his money and had to leave it. Then the Carslakes moved in. Johnny Carslake broke his leg falling down the stairs, and Mrs. Carslake had to flee to the south of France for her health. And now the Burdens are there, and poor Mr. Burden must have an operation at once." "Nonsense," said Mr. Petherick briskly. "Superstitious chatter ruins property value. Most haunted houses suffer more from gossip than ghosts." Sir Henry chuckled. "Oh, I've known a ghost or two with far sturdier spines than that." Raymond tapped the arm of his chair. "Let's allow Dr. Pender to continue." Joyce swept to her feet, switched off the lamps, and left only the flicker of the fire to illuminate their circle. The room fell into a soft, mysterious darkness. "There," she murmured. "Atmosphere. Now it feels like a story." Dr. Pender gave her an indulgent smile, leaned back, removed his pince-nez, and began in a low, thoughtful tone. "I don't know how many of you know Dartmoor, properly know it. What I'm about to tell you took place on the very edge of it. A charming property, though it had lingered on the market for years, with no buyer willing to take it. Winter had a way of stripping the land bare, leaving it honest and a little bleak. But at Silent Grove, bleakness came with a strange, arresting beauty. The hills rolled out in vast purple waves, and the wind seemed to carry centuries on its breath. The house itself, though new to my eyes, held whispers of the old world. It fascinated me at once. Sir Richard Hayden had bought the property only months before. I hadn't seen him since our days at college, when we were both young, earnest, and optimistic about the future. But old friendships have a way of surviving long silences. When his invitation came, I accepted gladly. The house party was intimate but eclectic. There was Richard himself, bright, restless, charming, and his cousin, Elliot Hayden, whose quieter nature only made the contrast more striking. Lady Mannering attended with her daughter Violet, a pale and unassuming girl who drifted like a shadow in a company of stronger personalities. Captain Rogers and his wife were there too, seasoned, sunburned hunting people with more interest in horses than conversation. A young physician, Dr. Simons, rounded out the men, and then there was Diana Ashley. I knew her face before I ever heard her voice. Society papers adored her, photographers chased her. Beauty is often exaggerated in print, but hers was not. Diana was tall and dark, with skin like pale ivory and eyes tilted at the corners, half lit in a way that made her seem always amused or evaluating. Her voice was deep, warm, and resonant, a voice that could make the most trivial remark sound like a promise. It became immediately clear that Richard was enthralled by her. The entire gathering, truthfully, felt arranged for her benefit, a stage set with friends and acquaintances while she played the unwilling, unpredictable star. One moment she lavished attention on Richard alone, the next she flirted with Elliot while ignoring Richard entirely, and then she would turn her dazzling smile upon shy Dr. Simons, reducing him to helpless admiration. Her capriciousness was part of her charm and her danger. The morning after my arrival, Richard took us on a tour of the property. The house was solidly built, a granite fortress against the merciless Devon winds. It lacked romance, perhaps, but it radiated comfort. Thick walls, warm rooms, and wide windows overlooking the endless expanse of Dartmoor. From those windows, one could see the ancient tors, looming monoliths carved by time, crowned with thorny heather. On the nearest slopes lay hut circles, remnants of Neolithic dwellers. Farther off, atop another hill, was a barrow recently opened, yielding bronze tools and echoes of forgotten lives. Richard, who fancied himself a student of antiquity, spoke with a boy's enthusiasm. "This whole region is rich with the past," he explained as we walked. "Neolithic hut circles, Druid traces, Roman roadwork, even hints that the Phoenicians themselves passed through here. Traders or settlers, no one knows." His eyes gleamed with excitement as he gestured ahead. "But this is the real treasure. The place's namesake, Silent Grove." The land around us was barren heather and scattered rock. But 100 yards from the house stood a cluster of ancient trees, growing so closely together that their branches knitted overhead like tangled ribs. The grove was dense, unnatural, almost sculpted. "It's something extremely old," Richard said. "These particular trees have come and gone, but the grove is preserved more or less as it always was, perhaps since Phoenician times. Come and see." We followed him beneath the canopy. The moment we stepped inside, a weight settled over me. The air was still, unnaturally so. Not a single bird stirred. Even the wind seemed barred from entering. The silence throbbed in my ears, and a faint sense of dread curled in my stomach. Desolation, loneliness, something else, something colder. I turned unsettled, and found Richard watching me with an odd, knowing smile. "Well, Pender," he asked lightly, "do you feel anything in this place?" Hayden's lips curved as he watched my reaction. "Antagonism now? Or merely uneasiness?" he asked lightly. I drew a slow breath before answering. "I don't like it," I said quietly. He nodded, almost pleased. "You within your rights," he said. "This was a stronghold of one of the ancient enemies of your faith. This," he swept a hand around shadow clearing, "is the Grove of Astarte." "Astarte?" I repeated. "Astarte, Ishtar, Ashtoreth. Take your pick. I prefer the old Phoenician name myself." His voice warmed with a scholar's enthusiasm. "There is only one documented Grove of Astarte in this country, far up north near the wall. I have no proof yet, but I like to believe this grove is authentic. Here, within this ring of trees, sacred rites were once performed." "Sacred rites," Diana Ashley murmured. Her dark eyes were half-lidded, dreamy, as though the very word had cast a spell over her. What sort of rites, I wonder? Nothing that would suit the church. Captain Rogers laughed, too loudly. All a bit, well, hot stuff, I imagine. Hayden ignored him completely. In the center of the grove, he continued, there would have stood a temple. I can't quite afford a temple, but his eyes glinted mischievously. I've allowed myself a small indulgence. We stepped into a clearing. Sunlight filtered unevenly through the canopy, casting long, tremulous shadows on a little stone structure, something between a summer house and a shrine. Diana looked at it with wide, curious eyes. And what is that? I call it the Idol House. Hayden said, the Idol House of Astarte. He led us inside. Upon a squat ebony pillar sat a small, dark figure, a woman with crescent horns, seated majestically upon a lion. A star of the Phoenicians, Hayden proclaimed. Goddess of the moon. The goddess of the moon, Diana echoed, stretching the word into a theatrical whisper. How deliciously eerie. Oh, we must have a wild orgy tonight. Fancy dress. We'll come out in the moonlight and reenact the rites of Astarte. I started so abruptly that Elliot Hayden turned toward me at once. You don't like this, do you, Padre? He asked. No, I said gravely. I don't. He gave me a puzzled look. But it's only Dick's nonsense. He doesn't really imagine this is a sacred grove. It's just an idea, something to play with. Even if it were, I prompted. He hesitated, then laughed weakly. Well, you're not suggesting you believe in that sort of thing, surely? You're a parson. I'm not certain, I said slowly, that being a parson absolves me from believing in it. That kind of superstition is finished, he insisted. I'm not convinced of that. I murmured. I only know this. I'm not a man easily affected by atmospheres or impressions. But ever since I stepped into this grove, I have felt something, an undercurrent of evil, of menace. Something oppresses his place. Elliot shivered and glanced behind him. Yes, he admitted softly. It is queer. I feel it too, though perhaps it's only imagination. Simons, what do you make of it? The young doctor paused before answering. I don't like it, he said finally. I can't explain why, but I don't like it. Just then Violet Mannering hurried over to me, her face pale. I hate this place, she whispered urgently. I hate it. Please, let's go. We moved back toward the path, and the others followed. Everyone except Diana Ashley. When I looked over my shoulder, she still stood before the idol house, staring at the ancient idol with an intensity that chilled me. The day grew hotter as afternoon advanced, a strangely oppressive heat for the season. Diana's idea of fancy dress party was received with enthusiasm, and soon the house was full of laughter, whispers, and frantic sewing as everyone conspired over their costumes. By dinner time, the transformation was complete. Rogers and his wife, wrapped in furs and leather scraps, proclaimed themselves Neolithic hut dwellers, an announcement that explained the sudden absence of several hearth rugs. Richard appeared as a swaggering Phoenician sailor. Elliot donned the flamboyant cape of a brigand chief. Dr. Simons dressed as a chef, Lady Mannering as a nurse, Violet as a Circassian slave. As for myself, I was absurdly warm beneath the heavy robes of a monk. At last Diana swept in. A ripple of disappointment passed around the table. She wore a black domino, shapeless, concealing, entirely at odds with her usual flair. The unknown, she said airily, with a wave of her graceful hand. That is what I am tonight. Now, for goodness sake, let's go into dinner, Diana announced breezily, a playful command that broke the strange mood hanging over us. After dinner, we drifted out onto the terrace. The night was warm and deceptively soft, the kind of night that seems to whisper pleasant things while hiding its darker intentions. The moon was lifting over the horizon, pale gold against the black silhouette of the distant tors. We strolled across the lawn, chatting, laughing half-heartedly, but the minutes slipped by before anyone noticed what was missing. "Where's Diana?" Richard Hayden asked suddenly. Violet Mannering shook her head. "Oh, she hasn't gone to bed. I saw her heading that way about 15 minutes ago." She gestured toward the grove, that brooding cluster of shadowed trunks and tangled branches, entirely black now under the moon, a place that seemed to swallow light and sound alike. "I wonder what she's plotting," Richard muttered. "Some devilment for certain. Come on, let's find her." We followed him, our curiosity piqued, our steps uncertain. For my part, a heavy reluctance pressed upon me, the same sense of unseen warning I felt earlier, only sharper now. Something in that grove felt awake, watching, waiting. I was not alone. Several faces were tense, though no one spoke of it. The air changed as soon as we crossed beneath the branches. The moon vanished behind a wall of leaves. The darkness was thick, almost tangible. Soft whispering noises drifted from every direction, sighs, breathy rustles, subtle movements in the undergrowth. Every sound felt as though it came too close. We huddled together instinctively. Then, without warning, the trees parted and we stepped into the central clearing and froze. A figure stood before the Idol House. She glowed in the moonlight, wrapped in sheer gauze that shimmered like woven frost. Crescent horns rose from the dark coils of her hair, gleaming like polished bone. "My God," Richard whispered, beads of sweat breaking across his brow. But Violet saw the truth quicker. "It's Diana," she breathed. "But she looks so different." The figure lifted both hands and stepped forward. Her voice, when it came, was clear and musical, ringing across the clearing like a spell. "I am the Priestess of Astarte," she intoned. "Beware how you approach me, for death is in my hand." "Oh, do stop it, dear," Lady Mannering said nervously. "You're giving us the most dreadful chills." But Hayden stepped toward her, mesmerized. "Diana," he said hoarsely, "you're extraordinary." As my eyes adjusted to the moonlight, her transformation became undeniable. She looked altered, subtly, disturbingly. Her beauty had sharpened into something exotic and cruel. Her eyes were narrowed to dark slits, gleaming with a cold, ancient triumph. The half-smile on her lips was not one I had ever seen before. "Beware," she cried. "Touch me, and the goddess will strike. One hand, one breath, and death will fall upon you." "Diana, enough," Richard said, still advancing. I don't like this." She flung out an arm, fingers splayed, as though casting a curse. "One step nearer," she commanded, "and I will smite you with the magic of Astarte." Richard laughed uncertainly and moved forward again, and then it happened. He faltered, stumbled, and collapsed as though struck down by an invisible blow. He didn't rise. He didn't move at all. Diana began to laugh, a high, hysterical sound that shattered the silence like breaking glass. The hair prickled at the back of my neck. With a furious oath, Elliot lunged forward. "I can't stand this," he shouted. "Dick, get up, man." But Richard Hayden lay motionless where he had fallen. Elliot knelt beside him, turning the body over, peering down with growing horror. Then he stood, swaying slightly, his voice hoarse. "Doctor, for God's sake, come. I think he's dead." Dr. Simons rushed to him. Elliot drifted back to us, staring at his own hands, staring as though he didn't recognize them. Then Diana screamed, a raw, piercing sound of terror and guilt. "I have killed him," she cried. "Oh God, I didn't mean to, but I have killed him." Diana collapsed before any of us could reach her, the shimmering gauze folding around like extinguished flame, her body dropping soundlessly onto the moonlit grass. Mrs. Rogers let out a sharp, trembling cry. "Oh, let's get away from this horrible place." Anything might happen here. Anything. Oh, it's dreadful. Elliot seized my shoulder. His grip was desperate. Fingers digging into my coat. "It can't be," he whispered hoarsely. "I tell you it can't be. A man doesn't just die like that. It's against nature." I tried to calm him. "There must be a rational explanation," I said gently. "Your cousin may have had some weakness of the heart. The shock, the excitement." "No," Elliot snapped. His voice broke. "You don't understand." He raised his hands, and in the moonlight I saw it, a dark red stain drying between his fingers. "Dick didn't die from shock," he whispered. "He was stabbed straight through the heart. And there's no weapon." I stared at him, stunned. Before I could speak, Dr. Simons rose from beside the body. His face, normally so composed, was drained of all color. He looked shaken to his core. "Are we all mad?" he murmured. "What is this place that such things can happen in it?" "So it's true," I breathed. He nodded heavily. "The wound is clean, made by a long, thin blade. But there's no blade to be found. Nothing." We exchanged helpless glances. The night around us suddenly colder. "It must be here." Elliot cried. "It must have fallen somewhere. Help me look." We searched, eyes sweeping frantically over grass, the stones, the dim curves of roots. Nothing, not a glint, not a scrap of metal. Violet Mannering gasped softly. Diana had something in her hand. I saw it, something sharp. It glittered when she threatened him. Elliot shook his head fiercely. He never came within 3 yards of her. Lady Mannering knelt beside the unconscious girl. "She's holding nothing," she said, "and I don't see anything on the ground." "Are you sure, Violet?" "I didn't see any weapon." Dr. Simon straightened, wiping his forehead. "We must get her inside. Rogers, give me a hand." Between us, we lifted Diana and carried her back to the oppressive trees, their shadows stretching like fingers behind us. Then we returned for Sir Richard's body, lifting him gently, silently, for none of us had the presence of mind to leave him where he fell. That knowledge came later. At that time, detective procedure had not yet become common wisdom. We laid Richard Hayden in his bedroom, and the butler sped off on his bicycle into the darkness to fetch the police, facing a 12-mile ride through the moor. When I stepped back into the corridor, Elliot intercepted me. "I'm going back," he said. His voice shook, but his eyes were blazing. "I'm in the Grove again. That weapon must be found." "If there even was a weapon," I said quietly. He grabbed my arm sharply. "You got that superstition into your head," he said. "You think something supernatural killed him. Well, I'm going to prove you wrong." A wave of dread washed over me. Thick, cold, absolute. "Elliot, don't," I urged. "Not alone. That grove. There's something wrong there. I can feel it." We all felt it. But he shook his head stubbornly. He was frightened. I could see that now. But he would rather die than admit it. "I'm armed," he said, "and I'm going to solve this. Tonight." And before I could reach him, before I could speak another word, he turned and strode back into the night, headed straight for the silent grove of trees, headed straight into the darkness that had already taken one life. It was a terrible night. Not one of us even attempted to sleep. We drifted restlessly through the rooms of that granite house, each of us waiting for dawn, each of us listening for something, anything that might explain the horror that had taken place. When the police finally arrived, their disbelief was almost insulting. The entire story struck them as absurd. One could see skepticism stiffening their shoulders, tightening their lips. They were especially eager to interrogate Diana Ashley, but Dr. Simon stood in their way like a brick wall. "She is not to be disturbed," he said firmly. "She has only just come out of her faint. I have administered a strong sleeping draught. She will wake when she wakes." They protested. They insisted. Simons would not yield an inch. And so, unwillingly, they waited. It was not until 7 o'clock that anyone realized Elia Hayden had not been seen since the night before. Simons was the first to speak. "Where's Elliot?" he asked suddenly. I explained what happened. How Elia had insisted on return to the grove to find a weapon. Simons listened, and the already grave expression on his face darkened further. "I wish he hadn't gone," he murmured. "It was rash." "You don't think," I hesitated, "you don't think anything could have happened to him?" "I hope not," Simons replied quietly. "But we must go and see. Padre, will you come with me?" Every cell in my body resisted the idea of returning to that grove. The very thought of it filled me with a cold, creeping dread. But I knew Simons was right. And so, summoning what courage I could, I went with him. We stepped into the trees again. The grove felt even worse in daylight. Pale, ghostly, as though the night's horrors had seeped into the bark of every trunk. We called Elliot's name. No answer. A moment later, we broke through into the clearing and froze. It was like a horrible echo of the night before. A body lay on the grass in the exact same spot where Richard Hayden had fallen. "My God," Simon breathed. "It's got him too." We rushed to him. Elliot Hayden was alive, barely, breathing in ragged, fragile gasps. And this time there was no mystery about a missing weapon. A long, thin bronze dagger was embedded in his shoulder. Through the shoulder, not the heart, Simons muttered. "He's lucky. God knows how, but he's lucky." He knelt beside the wounded man, shaking his head in disbelief. "On my soul," he whispered, "I don't know what's happening in this place." When Ellie recovered enough to speak, his story was disjointed, disordered, yet chilling. He'd searched for the dagger until he finally gave up, then stationed himself near the Idol House. That was when he felt it, the sensation of being watched. "I tried to shake it off," he murmured, "but I couldn't. It felt like eyes, cold, old eyes coming from everywhere." Then a strange wind had blown, not rustling the trees, but welling up from inside the Idol House itself. Turning, Elliot had seen the small carved figure of Astarte, and in that moment something shifted, distorted. "It grew larger," he whispered. "I swear it. It grew. It filled the doorway." His voice broke. Then something hit me between the temples, a blow, a sharp one. And as I felt the pain in my shoulder like fire, he remembered nothing more. The dagger was immediately recognized. It was the ancient weapon unearthed in the Baron Hill, the one Richard Hayden had purchased as a curiosity. No one knew where he had been keeping it. In the house? In the Idol House? No one could answer. The police still maintain, that Ellie was stabbed by Diana Ashley. They consider it the only reasonable explanation, but we all testified that Diana had never been within yards of him. They could not press the charge. And so the matter remains. A mystery, a dark, lingering shadow in that silent grove, and one that has never been solved. A long, uneasy silence hung over the room when Dr. Pender finished. Firelight flickered against the walls, painting everyone's expressions in restless shadow. At last Joyce Lampriere exhaled softly. "Honestly, there doesn't seem anything left to say," she murmured. "It's all so horrible and so uncanny. But you must have some explanation, Dr. Pender? Something of your own." The old clergyman folded his hands, his voice quiet but steady. "Yes," he said, "I do have one. A sort of explanation, at least. Though even to me, it leaves certain things unresolved." Joyce leaned forward. "I've been to seances, and you can scoff if you like, but strange things can happen. Perhaps it was some kind of hypnotic state. Diana Ashley might have transformed herself into her own idea of a priestess of Astarte, and perhaps somehow she stabbed him. Maybe she threw the dagger Violet saw on her hand. Or a spear, Raymond suggested. Moonlight distorts everything. She could have been holding something long, something she could thrust forward from a distance. Add a little mass hysteria and, well, you all expected something supernatural. So when a man fell dead, that's how you interpreted it. Sir Henry grunted. I've seen remarkable feats with knives and music halls. A professional could have thrown a dagger from the trees. Clean and silent. Far-fetched, yes, but not impossible. And remember, Elliot said he felt someone watching him. As for Violet insisting Diana had a dagger, but the others saying she didn't, that's nothing. 5 witnesses will give you 5 different stories of the same event. Human memory is an imprecise instrument. Mr. Petherick cleared his throat with solemn firmness. But all these theories overlook one crucial point, he said. Where did the weapon go? Miss Ashley couldn't have flung away a javelin or anything, really, while standing in an open clearing. And if a hidden murderer had thrown a knife, the weapon would still have been lodged in Sir Richard's body when he fell. We must dismiss these extravagant fantasies and limit ourselves to sober fact. Raymond frowned. And where exactly does sober fact take us? To one conclusion, Petherick replied. No one was near Sir Richard when he fell. Therefore, the only person who could stab him was Sir Richard himself. A suicide. Raymond stared. But why would he want to kill himself? It makes no sense. That, said Petherick dryly, is a matter for theory. I am only addressing mechanics, not motives, excluding the supernatural, which I do entirely. The simplest explanation is that he stabbed himself. As he fell, his arms flung outward, and the dagger might have been torn free and thrown into the trees. Improbable, yes, but possible. Miss Marple looked troubled. Her knitting needles paused mid-air. I don't like to speak too positively, she said gently. It all puzzles me dreadfully. But the world is full of curious things, you know. Why, at Lady Sharpley's garden party, last year the gentleman laying out the clock golf course tripped over one of the numbers and fell completely unconscious. Lay there for 5 minutes before he came round. Raymond, suppressing a smile, patted her hand. Yes, Aunt Jane, but he wasn't stabbed. Of course not, dear, she said earnestly. That's precisely what I'm telling you. Sir Richard was stabbed, and there's only one way that could have happened. But I can't help wishing I knew what caused him to stumble in the first place. People do trip in moonlight. One doesn't see tree roots or hummocks when one's eyes are fixed on a beautiful girl in a costume. She hesitated, then added softly, and sometimes places have their own ways of making people fall. The fire cracked, a burst of sparks rising like startled ghosts. No one spoke again. The fire had burned low, its glow settling into a red, pulsing hard at the grate. When a clergyman looked over at Miss Marple with quiet curiosity, "You said there was only one way Sir Richard could have been stabbed, Miss Marple," he prompted. Miss Marple folded her hands gently in her lap. "It is sad," she said. "I don't like to think of it. But if one looks only to facts, just as Mr. Petherick advised, and ignores all that unpleasant business of heathen goddesses and moonlit curses, well, one must admit it, I'm afraid." She paused delicately. He was a right-handed man, was he not, Dr. Pender? To stab himself in the left shoulder would have been very awkward, rather like poor Jack Baines in the war. Shot himself in the foot after Arras. He told me about it in hospital. Very ashamed he was. Still, that sort of thing could be done. But this? No. Her blue eyes lifted with mild astonishment. I don't expect the poor man, Elliot Hayden, profited much by his wicked deed. Raymond West shot upright. Elliot Hayden? You think he did it? Miss Marple blinked at him. My dear boy, I don't see how anyone else could have done it. He was the first to reach Sir Richard, remember? He turned him over, his back to all of you, and being dressed as a brigand chief, Of course he would have had some sort of dagger in his belt. They always do. I danced with one at a fancy dress ball when I was a girl. 5 different knives he had, and quite impossible it made to waltz, I assure you. A stunned silence swept across the room. All eyes turned to Dr. Pender. He drew a slow breath. I learned the truth, he said quietly. 5 years after the tragedy. No one moved. It came in the form of a letter from Elliot Hayden himself. He wrote that he believed I had always suspected him. He confessed that it was a moment's temptation. He, too, loved Diana Ashley, but he was only a poor and struggling barrister. With Richard gone and inheriting both his cousin's estate and title, he saw a dazzling future spread out before him. A shadow crossed his face. The dagger slipped from his belt as he bent beside Richard. He acted before he had time to think. One quick thrust. Then he slid the weapon back into its sheath and stood, calling for help. Several people gasped. He stabbed himself later. Dr. Pender continued softly, to divert suspicion. The letter was written on the eve of an expedition to the South Pole, in case he did not return. I believe he had no intention of returning. His voice lowered. For 5 years, he wrote, I have lived in hell. I pray I may at least expiate my crime by dying honorably. There was a heavy pause, one in which even the embers seemed to hush. At last Sir Henry spoke, his tone subdued, and he did die honorably. You changed the names, Dr. Pender, but I recognize a man. Dr. Pender nodded slowly. Yes, but you see, even knowing the truth, even knowing the human hand behind the tragedy, I still cannot shake the feeling that something in that grove nudged him toward it. Something old, something malignant, something that whispered in that moonlit house of stone. His eyes drifted to flames. To this day, I cannot think of the Idol House of Astarte without a shudder. The fire cracked sharply. No one spoke again. You just heard The Idol House of Astarte, a tale where reason and faith clash beneath the shadow of something far older than either. I'm Rob, your host, and here on Audible Archives, we resurrect the classics, giving voice to the mysteries that never die. If you enjoyed this retelling, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe, because some stories once heard refuse to sleep.